We are introduced to Mimori Toka, a kid who has less personality as a bag of rocks. He has accustomed himself to a life of isolation due to his traumatic upbringing and abusive parents, so now he impulsively tries to fade into the background and avoid trouble. Right now, the class president, Soku, is getting bullied by the class jerk, Oyamada, who has stolen her book for no reason. And no one really cares enough to help her, especially not the teacher who clearly hates his job. Since no one is stepping up to save Sogo, Mimori decides to take action for once and gets up from his seat to ask Oyamada to return her book. Oyamada is surprised that a nobody like Mimori would dare stand up to him. However, just as he is about to start bullying Mimori as well, the class Chad Takutu speaks up and tells Oyamada to quiet down. Oyamada tries to appeal to Takutu and says he wants to teach Mimori his place as a background character, but Takutu doesn't intend to let that happen. To be clear, he doesn't care about Mimori at all, or Sogo for that matter. He just doesn't want Oyamada to cause any more trouble because it's annoying to listen to. Oyamada doesn't like it, but since Takutu is the alpha, he has no choice but to listen to him and settle down. Oyamada returns Sobu's book and sits back down. But since he needs to keep himself entertained, he quietly starts bullying the kid across from him, Yasu. The teacher finally speaks up and tells Oyamada to quit messing with Yasu. He doesn't really care, but if Oyamada bullies Yasu so much that he ends up jumping off a bridge, then he won't get his yearly bonus. But if Yasu wants to jump off a bridge after his bonus, then the teacher has no problem with it as long as he does a flip. Things get quiet on the bus after that, but then all the students are suddenly transported into a room where they are greeted by the goddess Vicious. She explains that her kingdom, Alien, summons brave warriors to have them fight the evil demon emperor every time he appears. The last time the demon emperor showed up was 200 years ago, and he was thankfully defeated by the valiant efforts of the previous heroes. However, the great emperor has been revived once more, so Alien has summoned the students to be the next heroes of the kingdom of Alien. The students are still greatly confused by everything that has happened so far, so they think this entire thing is either a prank or maybe they all died in a bus crash. The teacher gets everyone's attention and tells them that he's not sure what's going on either, but for now, they should all just listen to Vicious. Vicious thanks him, thinking he understands what she has been saying, but in reality, he is just blinded by Booba. Perverted teacher aside, Mimori takes a moment to assess the situation. This building doesn't seem like anything he has ever seen before. There's a goddess standing in front of him, and he doesn't feel like he's in a dream, so there's only one conclusion to be made. They have actually been summoned to another world. Takundo clarifies that the goddess wants them to defeat this so-called demon emperor, but he wants to know what happens if they refuse to cooperate. The goddess tells them that she unfortunately does not have the power to send them home if they don't want to become Alien's heroes, but there is still a way for them to go back to Earth. It involves a reverse summoning ritual which requires an evil element, and the only way to acquire this evil element is to get it from the heart of the demon emperor, or to absorb the element as it is released upon the death of the demon emperor. Oyamada still doesn't see a reason why any of them should put their lives on the line to fight this demon emperor when Vicious essentially kidnapped them. So Vicious does the only thing she can and begs them to reconsider being this world's saviors. Sobu speaks up to introduces herself as the class president, and even if Vicious refers to them as saviors, they are still just high school students, so they wouldn't be of much use if they were sent into war. Vicious tells her that there's no need to worry about that since they have been bestowed with powers that no other human being in this world has. They all find this hard to believe, so Vicious decides to give them a little demonstration to prove that special abilities truly exist. She calls for a prisoner to be brought out, and then a demonic beast which proceeds to eat the prisoner. And after the demon has mercilessly mauled the prisoner, Vicious casts a fireball to incinerate it. That should have sufficiently traumatized the students so they can accept that they are in a new world. And now that they've come to believe what she has been saying, Vicious directs their attention to a crystal ball which will be used to evaluate their abilities. One by one, the students step up to have their abilities evaluated, and they all seem to have decent aptitude. Notably, when Oyamada goes up to the crystal ball, it glows a brilliant red color, meaning he is incredibly powerful by this world's standards. Next up is Takuto, and when he puts his hand on the crystal, it completely shatters. Everyone is shocked and confused by what's just happened, so the goddess explains this means Takuto is S rank. S rank is the top of the line when it comes to power and leaves above everyone else, so having a single S rank hero is already really lucky. But as the aptitude test continues, it is revealed that Sogu is also S rank as she shatters the backup orb they brought in. And it doesn't end there either, as there is a third S rank hero who shatters the second backup orb in storage. Vicious is in disbelief at how wonderful the hero roster is turning out to be, so she asks who the next person is going to be. And that person turns out to be Mimori. He puts his hand on the crystal, and it begins to glow purple, but the light emanating from the orb is much weaker than it was with the others, so he asks Vicious what his rank is. However, she completely ignores him and asks for the next person to come up. Mimori is used to getting ignored, so he just rolls with it and moves on, but then he notices that the last person to be examined was Yusa, and the orb shows a dark mass in the center, which means he is the dark hero of the group, and as far as their records show, the dark hero is often far more powerful than any other heroes in the group. So essentially, everyone needs to be careful because the quiet kid just got his gun. After that, the goddess gave everyone instructions on how to check their statuses, and when Mimori takes a look at his stats, he realizes that his stats kinda suck. The goddess created this window so that the heroes could get accurate information about their abilities wherever they want, so Mimori looks a little closer and notices something called an inherent skill. Inherent skills are skills that are unique to any given hero, and they can typically be used immediately, but some may need to be awakened at a higher level. But that's enough explanations for now, as Vicious tells everyone that they will now be performing a very necessary ritual for their success. She calls Mimori forward and explains that he is E rank, and as the record books show, the lowest ranked heroes always did nothing but slow down the more powerful ones, therefore she's making the executive decision to dispose of him. However, killing a hero just for being weak would be too morally ambiguous for her, so she decided to give Mimori a chance to earn his life back. Instead of outright killing him, she will send him to some ruins, and if he manages to survive, then he can live as he pleases in the world. Mimori asks if these ruins are dangerous, and Vicious answers that of course the ruins are dangerous, it wouldn't be much of an execution grounds if it were safe. Mimori tries to talk his way out of this and says he has an inherent skill of abnormal status endowment, so that must be useful to the team somehow, but to his dismay, the goddess tells him that abnormal status spells and skills in this world are totally useless, since they almost never actually work as intended, and even when they do work, they aren't very useful anyway. Mimori tries to appeal to the goddess's morality and says she can't just dispose of him when she is the one who summoned him here without his consent, but her name is literally Vicious, so I don't think she cares. As Mimori is trying to come to terms with his fate, Yasu touches his shoulder, and Mimori thinks Yasu is going to stand up for him since he used to help him out back when he was getting bullied on Earth. However, now that he has power, Yasu has turned into just as much of a jerk as the others, so he mocks Mimori for being weak and condemns him to his terrible fate. By now, Mimori has realized that no one cares about him being disposed of here, and all the other students just want him gone. So he stands to accept his fate as Vicious throws him a magic bag as a consolation gift. However, there's at least one person there who knows this isn't right, as Sobu steps up and asks Vicious to reconsider the disposal of Mimori. However, Vicious is dead set on disposing of Mimori, so she just knocks Sogu out so she can't complain about it. Mimori can't stand the cruelty and mockery any longer, so he attempts to use his abnormal status effect skill to paralyze the goddess, but unfortunately, as a goddess she always has an anti-abnormal status shield which she hasn't used since the Heian era. She mocks Mimori for failing his attack, and without further delay she wants everyone to witness as this loser is teleported to his doom. Just then, Takudu fires off a blast which leaves a huge hole in the wall, but as the goddess looks over to him, he clarifies that he isn't trying to save Mimori or anything. He just wanted to test out his powers and didn't realize it would do that much damage. Some of Mimori's classmates derive joy in watching him be disposed of, while others remain indifferent, and the one person who supported him was knocked out, so as he is about to be teleported, Mimori gives up on his background character act and gives Vicious the middle finger, vowing to make her regret this someday. Mimori wakes up in the abandoned ruins and tries to open his status screen, but his system tells him that he is unable to do so because of the low level of light in the area. That's when he remembers the bag he got, so after pouring a little mana into it, it generates enough light for him to see again. However, as he is walking around, he stumbles across a human skeleton on the ground, and whatever killed the skeleton is still in the ruins, so Mimori is on edge now. He ends up tripping over some rocks, and it's a good thing he did because that allowed him to narrowly evade a sneak attack from a terrifying monster. He has no time to think or worry about where he's running to because if he stops for even a moment, he will be killed. As he continues to run, Mimori ends up tripping over a rock, and as the monster closes in on him, the emotion he is feeling isn't fear, but rather frustration. Frustration at the fact that he was abandoned by all those jerks and is doomed to die because of it. He has no weapons to fight back with, and no useful skills to use since his abnormal status effects are apparently unlikely to work. However, that doesn't mean he's not going to try and use whatever he can to survive, so Mimori casts Paralyze on the monster, and to his astonishment, it actually works. He doesn't want to stick around to figure out why though, so he runs away again. As he does this, he thinks to himself that the paralysis must have been a one-time fluke, since Vicious said abnormal status effects have a low success rate. But in his haste to escape, Miyamori ends up running into another monster which looks like a cross between a chicken and a roach. Whatever it is going to kill him if he doesn't do something quickly, so Miyamori raises his hand and casts Paralyze again, fully expecting it to fail, but miraculously, it works again. Once could be a fluke, but 2 times in a row means his effect's success rate is way higher than what the goddess had claimed. It's possible that Miyamori's status effects are different from the weak ones that are native to this world, but even if he can defend himself with his spells, it will do him no good if he ends up running out of mana to use it. He only has 1 mana point left, so he uses it to cast poison on the monster, and once he does this, the monster begins to slowly die. In addition to having a high success rate, Miyamori's spells also have a really long duration, so he can just sit back and wait for the monster to die. He officially has 0 mana points left, so he doesn't know what will happen if he tries to use his status effects again. However, he doesn't get much time to recover as the first monster has caught up to him. The paralysis effect he cast earlier must have worn off, but even if he has no mana left, no one will come to save him, so Miyamori is prepared to fight for his survival. He attempts to use Paralyze on the Minotaur again, but this time the skill fails to activate, so Miyamori has to jump out of the way. He is informed by the system that he is not allowed to cast the same effect multiple times on a single target, so he comes up with a new plan and casts Sleep on the Minotaur, causing it to fall to the ground unconscious, and once the monster is out cold, Miyamori applies poison to it as well. It looks like there are no restrictions on stacking effects, but he is out of mana, so if he keeps using his skills, he will eventually burn through his stamina as well, and there are still a lot more monsters for him to deal with. Miyamori begins spamming paralysis, and eventually he has managed to stop all the monsters, but has left him on the verge of collapse. However, his troubles aren't over yet as even more monsters begin to approach, so he has no choice but to keep using Paralyze until his body can't take it anymore, and it's not long before he reaches his limit and can't go on. There are still a lot of monsters around him, but he knows if he tries to use his skill even one more time, it could mean the end of him. He has no other options available, but luckily, just as he's about to use up the last of his body's stamina, the cockatrice that he poisoned a while ago suddenly dies, and due to this, Miyamori's level shoots up until he is at level 258 and both his mana and stamina are replenished. Miyamori doesn't understand what happened at first, but then he notices the dead monster and realizes that he must have gotten experience because his poison killed that one, and with his energy replenished, he can keep fighting as much as necessary. As he continues to spam paralysis, his skill levels up, leading him to believe he can upgrade it by repeated use, but he will worry about that later since for now, he has to make sure he can escape this place alive. With his paralysis now being level 2, Miyamori notices that he now has the option to select multiple targets at once, so he does so, and the monsters are all immediately frozen in place. So far, his status effects have had 100% success rate, so Vicious is probably the only person in this world that his skill has no effect on. He begins inflicting poison on all the paralyzed monsters, and eventually his poison skill levels up as well, but there are still a lot more monsters here. So that means he can level up even more. Miyamori takes a look at his status window, and since he leveled up, his stats are far higher than they were when he first got here, especially his mana, which is now over 8,000, and mana is his only way of surviving this hellhole. Miyamori takes a break and sits down while he waits for the poison to do its thing, and eventually, the monsters begin dying one by one, raising Miyamori's level even further. By the time he is level 500, Miyamori is fairly confident that he can now make it out of the ruins, so he prepares to take care of the remaining monsters. However, after seeing Miyamori kill dozens of them with ease, the monsters have enough common sense to know that they shouldn't mess with him, so they all run off. Now that the area is safe, Miyamori sifts through the piles of rotting bones in order to find any loot that he could use, and after getting his hands on a cloak and a blade, he sets off to escape the ruins. As he looks for the exit, he comes across many different monsters, but he has realized that he faces another problem. He has no food, so he's going to starve soon if he doesn't get something to eat. He is so desperate that he is even willing to eat monster meat, so after retracing his steps, he returns to the monster corpses and reluctantly begins carving into them to eat what he can. However, as the eyeball pops out and Miyamori tries to eat it, he realizes that the monster's entire body has acid in it, so he won't be able to eat it after all. With no source of food, Miyamori believes he will starve to death before he ever makes it out of here. He has no energy left in his body, but then he notices the color of his magic bag changing, and since that's the only source of light he has, he frantically rushes over to supply it with more mana. However, as he does so, he feels something appear inside the bag, and to his delight, he finds a bag of beef jerky and a bottle of soda. He excitedly begins eating, and while this means his hunger problem is solved for now, he doesn't know for sure if he will be able to get the bag to produce food again. As days continue to pass inside the ruins, Miyamori has gotten used to committing mass monster genocide with his skills, but he is worried that he might be losing his humanity because of this. Back on Earth after suffering abuse at the hands of his stepfather, Miyamori was on the verge of having his murderous villain arc right then and there, but before he could lose his sense of humanity, he was rescued by his aunt and uncle who took him in and gave him a sense of normalcy. He learned empathy from them, and he thought he had become a normal person like them, but right now, as he is staring at the mountain of corpses beneath his feet, he feels nothing at all. There's no going back to how he was before, so Miyamori just accepts that he's a psychopath now and moves on. As he goes, he comes across another section of the ruins with a floating eyeball monster, but Miyamori just takes it out with his poison. As he moves forward, he comes across a door with a magic lock, and upon opening it, he finds a small room with 2 skeletons inside. He assumes they must have been people that were disposed of by Vicious as well, but they weren't fortunate enough to make it out alive. He searches through their things and finds a pouch full of gems, so while he feels bad about stealing from the dead, the gems could be valuable and he could use them once he gets out of here, so he no longer feels bad about it. He goes through the other rooms nearby as well, and eventually he comes across one that takes a large amount of mana to open. But once he finally unlocks it, he finds a skeleton sitting with a note next to it. The note says that the skeleton was once a man known as Anglin the Great Sage, and he was the former hero of darkness. The same one Vicious had mentioned was the strongest of them all. According to Anglin's note, Vicious sent him here by force after she no longer has a need for him as a hero, and while he was powerful enough to make it this far, he clearly couldn't escape, so he left a message to help the next person who could manage to make it this far. Vicious may have said the Demon Lord was evil, but she is just as bad in Miyamori's eye. Although we can't say he is much better than her either, since his only goal is to get revenge on her, and he doesn't care if he has to destroy the world to do it. As he is looting Anglin's corpse, he comes across a book of forbidden arts, and it is full of information about recipes for medicine and magic tool instructions that could prove to be useful later, so he decides to keep it. He also finds a scroll of forbidden magic, but he doesn't understand what it says. However, if a great sage like Anglin went through all the trouble of keeping it hidden with him up until his final moments, then it must be really powerful, and it may even be strong enough for Miyamori to eventually defeat the goddess if he is ever able to decipher it. Miyamori is just about ready to leave, but before he goes, he steals Anglin's cloak because it's cooler than his old one, and takes a look at Anglin's book again. But this time he sees a bloody warning telling him to beware of the Soul Eater. And the ominous warning has Miyamori wondering if the Soul Eater is the one who killed Anglin. Miyamori continues making his way through the ruins until he comes across a door that he thinks will lead to the surface. However, if this is truly the final door, then that must mean the Soul Eater Anglin was talking about is here as well. Miyamori remains cautious of his surroundings and takes a look at his stats to make sure he is prepared for this. He did all he could to ensure he leveled up as much as possible before he got here, so he can only hope that his skills are enough to defeat it. Miyamori eventually finds a creepy face, and he is certain that this must be the Soul Eater, so he immediately attempted to use Paralyze on it. But the second he steps out of cover, the Soul Eater fires a laser into his hand. This is the first time anything has managed to stop him from using his skill, and Miyamori has to kill it since the only way out is to use the gem on its forehead. To activate his skill, he needs to say it out loud and be within a certain distance, but none of that matters if the Soul Eater can attack him before he finishes casting the spell. While Miyamori is still thinking about what to do, the Soul Eater breaks out of the wall to go after him, so he really has no choice but to fight now. Meanwhile, outside the ruins, a girl is trying to escape from her pursuers and decides to hide nearby, not knowing that a fierce battle is taking place inside. As the Soul Eater slowly approaches Miyamori, he wonders why it hasn't fired its lasers at him yet, but he soon finds out why as the Soul Eater spits up some purple gunk, which takes the form of humans. These are the souls of the people the Soul Eater has killed, and they are being forced to attack Miyamori, so if he is forced to paralyze them. However, he can't bring himself to use poison because they are still human, even if they become gross globs of paste. The Soul Eater enjoys watching as Miyamori struggles because he can't attack the souls for moral reasons, and he can't attack the Soul Eater either because it would react too fast. Miyamori begins breaking down and crying a lot because he says he doesn't want to hurt other people, and he's losing aura by the minute with his constant crying. But as the Soul Eater is reveling in Miyamori's tears, he reveals that it was all an act as he paralyzes the Soul Eater. He knew he could never land a successful paralyze on the Soul Eater unless he managed to get it to lower its guard, so he pretended to be in the middle of a mental crisis just so the Soul Eater wouldn't suspect anything. And now that the Soul Eater is paralyzed, Mimori doesn't really care what happens to the souls if he kills the Soul Eater, and even though he spent so much time trying to become a harmless, law-abiding citizen, all he cares about are facts. Those soul puppets were trying to kill him, so they could be babies for all he cares. He's still going to poison them anyway. The Soul Eater struggles to move out of frustration that it lost to Mimori, and this lets Mimori know that powerful monsters can try to overcome his paralysis, but it does additional damage to their bodies. That's interesting and all, but he doesn't want to waste any more time here, so he casts poison on the Soul Eater and destroys it once and for all. Upon doing so, the souls that the Soul Eater consumed are released, and they all appear in front of Mimori to thank him for freeing them. They've been rooting for him as he tried to survive the ruins, and none of them really mind the fact that he looted their bodies either. Mimori is then approached by Anglin, and he has only one thing to say. He wants Mimori to take down the goddess and avenge them all. The souls of the dead pass on after that, and while Mimori normally wouldn't accept a request without some sort of compensation, he was already planning on taking her down anyway. And now that the final monster has been defeated, Mimori can open the door and begin his quest for revenge on the surface. Meanwhile, Mimori's classmates are all busy hunting to level up, and while Oyamada is busy chasing down a wolf, Takutu easily annihilates the monster with his Dragonic Burst, putting him at level 18. And Yasu is just having a blast with his powers over here. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, this girl is having a hard time coming to terms with the situation, but all of a sudden, she is approached by Asagi, who warns Kobato that she can't be spacing out like that, otherwise she'll end up getting herself killed. The reason she came over is because she wanted to discuss something with her, so she begins talking about how sooner or later the class is going to split into factions. There are a lot of powerful douchebags in the class, including her, so there's no way they'll keep getting along for much longer. That's why when the class eventually divides, she wants Kobato to join her faction. Besides, it's not like Kobato has many other options considering she's D rank. There's no way she'll be accepted into Takutu's S rank group while being D rank. The Takao sisters only ever team up with each other, and Subu's probably going to end up dead before long. Kobato was shocked to hear that, but Asagi continues by saying Kobato needs to think long and hard about her future since she may end up with nowhere to go. And while Asagi probably won't need her help much since she's B rank, she happens to be an Oppai enthusiast, and she's particularly fond of Kobato for that reason. Now that Kobato is on board with joining the group, Asagi calls for the other girls to bring over the monster they captured. She knows Kobato hasn't been able to complete the assignment the goddess gave them, so she prepared things to make it easier for her. Now all she needs to do is kill the defenseless monster, and Asagi urges her to do it unless she wants to end up getting disposed of like Mimori. Kobato doesn't want to do it, but she knows she has no choice, so she sucks up her morals and slays the monster. Asagi praises Kobato for doing a good job and says she is officially part of the group, but Kobato is still struggling to accept what she just did. Elsewhere, Sogu has just woken up from her coma, and the pain in her stomach reminds her of what must have happened to Mimori after the goddess gut punched her, and she feels really guilty for not being able to stop it. Sogu goes on to complain to Vicious, and Vicious is really trying to play the part of a caring goddess with all the fake tears, but she says the disposal of the weak is the policy of the Alien Kingdom, so there's nothing she can do about it. Vicious also informs Sogu that she doesn't have much time to wallow in sadness over it either, since while she was knocked out, her classmates headed out to the forest to see if they were able to kill monsters or not, and many of them ended up failing the requirements of the test, thus were disposed of. Sogu asks if Vicious intends to kill off any heroes who she deems to be weak, but Vicious claims it's Allian's policy, so it's not her fault even though she's a literal goddess. Sogu sees how things are going, so she wants to make it clear to Vicious that she doesn't approve of how things are being handled. Vicious doesn't see what the problem is since it's common sense that all the worthless people should be disposed of, so Sogu asks Vicious if she's a valuable hero since she is S-class. Vicious answers that Sogu is indeed very valuable, so Sogu proposes a deal. She will go above and beyond as an S-rank hero to make up for the weaknesses of the people who failed, so she asks that Vicious stop the disposal plan. Vicious says she can agree to those terms, so she extends her hand to make it official. She also wants to apologize for punching Sogu in the stomach, but she still thinks she was justified in doing so since Sogu was acting hysterical over the situation. Sogu clearly isn't fooled by Vicious's nice act, but she's got no other choice at the moment, so she agrees to shake her hand. But as she leaves, she notes that Vicious's hands were ice cold, just like her heart probably. Meanwhile, in the dark forest, a girl is trying to escape her pursuers, and she had thought she lost them. They are way too good at tracking. Based on nothing more than a broken leaf, the sword god, Bladen is able to tell exactly where the Princess Knight ran off to. She may be able to conceal herself, but if she keeps making rookie mistakes like these, the Holy Watchers are sure to catch up to her sooner or later. At the same time, Miyamori is just about to head out into the forest in hopes of finding a city, but before he does, he checks his stats one last time and notes that only his mana is exceptionally high at 50,000, while the rest of his stats hover around 5k. But he already knew that, so he really wants to confirm the new abilities he got with his skills leveling up. He is now able to dispel paralyze and poison at will or partially dispel it just to avoid killing his target immediately. That's going to be pretty useful when it comes to extracting information, so he decides to test it out on the next monster he encounters. For now, he's going to need a blade, or more specifically, someone who can act as a tank and handle the front lines for him. Just then, he hears some rustling in the bushes, so he goes over to check it out and finds a bunch of slimes ganging up on a single smaller slime, and he decides to stand there and watch as the smaller slime goes through his bullying character arc. Once the small slime learns to fight back, Miyamori is satisfied, so he paralyzes them all and uses the opportunity to test out the dispel option. He dispels the paralysis on the bully slimes first to get them to leave, and once they are gone, he tells the smaller slime that it doesn't need to worry since he has no intention of killing it. He's about to let it go as well, but before that, he wants to apologize for not helping sooner. He enjoyed seeing the little guy stand up for himself, so he tells the slime that it did well, and after releasing it, he heads off on his way. The slime doesn't really know what to do now since it doesn't have any slime friends to go back to, so it decides to follow Miyamori instead. Miyamori eventually notices that he is being followed, but he doesn't mind since he could use the company. Meanwhile, the Princess Mite is currently exhausted from all the running she has had to do, but even with the distance she has covered, she can still sense the presence of the Holy Watchers nearby. So they must just be waiting for her to tire out so they can capture her. Miyamori and the slime have bonded a little, so Slime is now sitting in the back of Miyamori's jacket to keep watch while he takes a look at the spellbook. After flipping through some pages, Miyamori finds the forbidden art he was looking for, and it's one that's meant to strengthen monsters. There are even instructions on how to strengthen slimes in particular, so this will come in handy for Miyamori, but he understands why it's classified as a forbidden art since these could cause a lot of chaos in the wrong hands. Before he does anything else, Miyamori talks to the slime and tells it that he is on a quest for revenge, so if the slime isn't okay with that, this is his last chance to back out. The slime says he wants to stick by Miyamori's side, so Miyamori names it Piggymaru and prepares to continue with his journey. The fleeing Princess Mite can sense that the Holy Watchers are closing in on her, so while she hoped she wouldn't have to use it, she is forced to activate her spirit contract. She offers up her sleep as payment and even does a whole Power Rangers transformation routine, but as the Holy Watchers finally catch up, they are shocked to find out that they've been tracking the wrong person since Miyamori definitely isn't their target. Now they could have just ignored Miyamori since he has nothing to do with their mission, but they're too scummy to do something like that. So one tells Miyamori to drop all his valuables so they don't have to kill him, but the other guy says he's still going to kill Miyamori anyway because it'll be fun. They also talk about doing my terrible things to his corpse, so Miyamori has already decided that these guys have got to go and walks in real quick. While the scumbags aren't paying attention, Miyamori starts shuffling away slowly, but while the group notices and think he was trying to escape, Miyamori was actually just trying to get them all within his field of vision. Miyamori plays the part of a scared weakling well, but as Maggots attempts to slice him up, he wastes no time in paralyzing him along with all his teammates. Since it was successful, Miyamori now knows that his status effects work on humans as well, so Vicious is probably the only person who's immune to them. Back to the Holy Watchers, these guys weren't as intimidating as the monsters he had to fight in the ruins, but their malicious intent was far worse, so Miyamori has no issue with killing them since they tried to kill him first. He casts his poison, and after all the Holy Watchers are dead, Miyamori spends some time looting their corpses, but then both he and Piggymaru sense some nearby. Meanwhile, the Princess Mite has been standing in battle position for a while now, and she just noticed that she can no longer feel the presence of the Holy Watchers in the forest, but she thinks it must be some kind of trap to get her to lower her guard. However, just then she senses someone else in the forest and it's freaking her out. This guy's presence isn't immensely powerful, but for some reason, the spirits are scared of him. Just then, she hears something behind her, so she attacks. However, it turns out to be Piggymaru, who was acting as a distraction for Miyamori. And with the girl's back turned, Miyamori paralyzes her. He sensed her intent to attack, but it wasn't out of malice, so Miyamori grew curious and thought they could chat for a bit, although he doesn't let her move as a precaution. She asks him what he wants from her, so Miyamori explains that he's not from around here and needs help learning about the area, so he was hoping she could make herself useful. Before that, she asks about the other 4 guys that were in the forest, so Miyamori tells her that he killed them. The girl is shocked, so Miyamori asks if it's a problem that he killed them, but she says she is just surprised that Miyamori was able to defeat the Holy Watchers on his own. She can sense that Mimori isn't lying to her, probably thanks to one of her abilities, so she agrees to answer any questions Mimori may have for her in return for saving her life from the Holy Watchers. Mimori can tell that this girl isn't a bad person, so he trusts her a little more now, but there are still some things that he would rather keep to himself though, and the same goes for the girl, so they both agree not to pry into each other's personal matters. As the timer for paralysis counts down, Mimori asks a lot of questions and learns that this place isn't even Alien. He is currently in a place called the Kingdom of Yuzul, so the goddess disposed of him in someone else's kingdom. Mimori still has one last question for the girl, so he pulls out a page from the Forbidden Arts book and asks the girl if she understands it. The girl is able to recognize that it is some sort of ancient script, but that was as much as she could say since she wasn't able to read it either. However, she says she may know of someone who can understand that writing, so she tells Mimori about the Witch of Taboos. She possessed such vast knowledge of forbidden techniques that she was deemed too dangerous and was driven from her homeland. Mimori asks where he should go if he wants to find her, so the girl instructs him to go to the land of the golden-eyed monsters, but it's a treacherous part of the continent. Mimori thanks her for the valuable information, but the girl doesn't feel like she has done enough to repay her debts since Mimori saved her life. Mimori says she doesn't have to worry about doing any more than this, so they'll be parting ways now. The girl is fine with it as long as Mimori is satisfied, and Mimori can tell that she has a strong sense of honor and honesty, which reminds him a lot of his aunt, who was so nice that it often made him worry about her. He tells her that the paralysis will be undone in a few minutes, but he can't guarantee her safety since he will be leaving now. As Mimori leaves, he says he hopes the girl makes it to her destination safely, and as Pigimura returns, he asks if Mimori isn't going to kill her. Mimori says he wouldn't do that since he doesn't find any joy in killing, he just does it for self-defense, so there's no reason to pointlessly murder the girl. Although he can't guarantee that the girl won't come after him to attack once she's free to move again, so he asks Pigimura to keep watching his back for him. Mimori soon makes it to the town and he is stopped at the front gate by a guard who is in charge of performing security checks. She assumes Mimori must be a traveling mercenary who came here to conquer the mill's ruins. Mimori plays along with the story and says he indeed came here to conquer the ruins, also adding that he comes from a rural town, so he doesn't know much about this place. His story seems convincing enough for the guard, so she lets him in since she has orders to allow as many mercenaries as possible to enter the town. Mimori is surprised by the relaxed security since there were no luggage checks or full cavity body searches, but it works out well for him since his plans are going smoothly. The first thing he does is head to an inn to get himself a room, but while he's at the front desk, the innkeeper is being pretty rude to him since he thinks Mimori is a broke loser. However, little does he know, Mimori looted a bunch of money off the corpses of the Holy Watchers, and as soon as he flashes a bit of cash, the innkeeper starts treating him a whole lot nicer. Mimori gets to stay in a room like he wanted, and now that his accommodations have been secured, he goes out into town for a bit to survey the area. And even though he's an outsider, he doesn't feel any hostility directed towards him, so he takes a leisurely stroll and comes across places like item shops and the town's Adventurers Guild. This information may come in handy later, but for now, Mimori has gotten hungry, so he turns around and heads to a nearby tavern to grab some food. He tries the food of this world for the first time, and it doesn't taste great, but it's edible enough that Mimori is okay eating it. He thinks this tavern is great because the people here are happy and drunk, and thus makes it easy to gather information since everyone is talking so loudly. He is able to overhear some guys talking about how the continent is full of insanely strong people, so they're having a power-scaling debate about who they think is the strongest. But in the end, they know that there's only one team that can hold the title of strongest, and that's the Black Dragon Knights who destroyed the kingdom of Mia. Their 5 dragons alone are enough to completely wipe out an army, but on top of that, they've got humanity's strongest and the hero's slayer, so it's a safe bet to say they would win any direct confrontation. After Miyamori has gathered a good amount of intel for the night, he takes some leftover rice back to his room so he can feed Pigimaro. And while Pigimaro is eating, he goes over his plans for the future. For now, his top priority is finding someone who knows how to read the language in the scrolls of forbidden magic, and the only person who would be able to do that is the Witch of Taboos. Another priority of his is to make the monster strengthening solution so he can improve the abilities of Pigimaro. But now that he's thinking about it, the nobleman of this town has been gathering mercenaries to conquer the mill's ruins, and one of the ingredients needed for the strengthening solution are the bones of the skeleton soldier. And skeleton soldiers just so happen to be found in the mill's dungeon, so Miyamori makes plans to head there tomorrow. The next day, all the mercenaries in town gather to what the Marquis, Cred Hercley, has to say. Cred tells them that a new floor within the ruins has been uncovered, so he is tasking them all with exploring said floor. And as a reward, he promises that whosoever manages to acquire the Dragon Eye Chalice that is within the ruins will receive a prize of 300 gold pieces. He is also willing to pay a good price for any other treasures that are brought back, and the mercenaries are free to use whatever monster parts they find as they see fit. Miyamori is glad because that means he will be allowed to keep the skeleton bones from the ruins once he acquires them. Now that everyone is clear on the terms, they all line up to begin registration, but while Miyamori is waiting in line, he notices a commotion going on at the other end of the line. There's this random guy constantly yapping about how one girl in line is really pretty. In fact, she's so pretty that he could swear she was a princess. Or maybe even a princess knight of the destroyed kingdom of Nian who has a bounty on her head perhaps. You see, what happened was that a couple years back, this guy tried asking the princess knight out on a date, but she said no. And from that day onwards, he had burned her face, voice, and chest into his memory so he could get his revenge someday. And she went to great lengths to ensure her face was covered, so the man has to have some degenerate skill if he was able to recognize her just from her opie. Anyway, to prove that he is right about her identity, he reaches over to pull off her cloak and show the crowd her face, but as he does so, he is shocked to find out that the girl's face isn't the same as that of Princess Saris Ashrain, and the girl now states that her name is Miss Pelucas. He never misidentifies Opie, so he knows that she must be Ashrain, but he has no way of proving it, so he swears to get his revenge on Mist, as well as every beautiful woman that has made him look like a fool. A little while later, Miyamori is planning on going shopping for some supplies to use during the mission, but as he is walking, the girl approaches him to ask if he's here to explore the dungeon as well. Miyamori recognizes her and feels sympathetic that she has to deal with so many people trying to reveal her identity, but she says it's not that much of a problem since she disguised her face ahead of time. Still, Miyamori suggests she be careful about guys like that because even if he doesn't know her real identity for now, he seems like he's petty enough to try attacking her just because she made him look like a fool in front of everyone. But that said, Miyamori tells her that he has a request he would like to make, so he explains that he has no idea about the value of the items in this town, so he would like her to help him negotiate so that he doesn't get swindled. And of course, he isn't asking her to do this for free as he promises to compensate her for her assistance if she accepts. She decides to accept his offer since she's pretty much broke right now, so the two shake hands and she introduces herself to him as her alias, Mist, while Miyamori introduces himself under the name Hati. The two of them proceed to go shopping together, and since Mist went negotiated for him, she ultimately saves Miyamori around 3 silver coins worth in deals, so he gives that to her as her compensation. She is surprised to receive this much money just for shopping with him, but Miyamori believes it is a fair reward for the help she offered him, so she accepts the payment and is about to leave. But as she attempts to walk away, she ends up collapsing to the ground. Miyamori asks her if she is alright and she says she's okay, but she hasn't been able to sleep well for the past few days, so she's a little tired. She then turns and leaves, so Miyamori leaves things as they are and decides to head to the ruins to begin hunting for skeletons. Within the ruins, as Miyamori is descending the stairs, he hears some mercenaries scream as they run past him that there's a little ox demon down there, so Miyamori assumes it must be a miniature version of the minotaurs he had to fight in the ruins of Disposal. The ox demon charges towards him, but Miyamori quickly paralyzes and poisons it, so it wasn't much of a threat to him. He then stabs the ox demon to test whether the demon's skin is as tough as the ones in the abandoned ruins, but this one is much easier to stab. A little while later, those mercenaries that ran away earlier return with backup to defeat the ox demon, but when they find it dead, they are shocked that someone was actually capable of killing a monster like this so quickly. Miyamori heads deeper into the ruins, but despite the place crawling with monsters, he isn't feeling very threatened by any of them since they are easy to kill. He isn't getting much experience from killing the monsters either, so he decides to head a little deeper into the ruins to find some strong monsters. While walking through the halls, he happens to overhear that loser from earlier talking to a couple mercenaries, and he is asking them to go after Miss and make her regret ever being born. All because she didn't want to go on a date with him and made him look like he was wrong about her identity. So he can't let her continue to live in this world, and preferably, he wants the mercenaries to make her suffer as much as possible before killing her so he can see the twisted look of despair on her. At first, the mercenaries thought it was messed up to go this far just because someone ignored him, but money is money, so they agree to do it and start talking about how they will torture her. Miyamori overhears all of this, and since he is sure these guys are irredeemable scumbags at this point, and he's not about to let them get away with their plans to kill Mist, so he steps out to confront them. As soon as they see him, they all threaten to kill Miyamori, but Miyamori just raises his hand and paralyzes them all. He then inflicts poison on them, and it feels oddly satisfying to eliminate scumbags when he gets the chance. After the scumbags are dead, Miyamori continues his venture into the ruins, but before he heads to the next level, he decides to take a little break. 3 hours later, Miyamori wakes up from his nap and thanks Piggymaru for being a lookout in case any monsters showed up. He exits the room to head to the next floor, but before he can do that, he runs into a team of mercenaries and they tell him to be careful since there's a lot of strange stuff happening in these ruins. People have been coming across a lot of monster corpses, but it's not clear what killed the monsters since there are no clear signs of attack. It pretty much looks like the monsters fell over dead in the middle of the ruins. As the leader of the Saber Tigers party, Lily Adamantite values the lives of her teammates more than anything else. So while she would normally continue with the ruins exploration, she has made the decision to back out and head back to the surface. She even offers to let Mimori come with her. But Mimori says he wants to continue with the ruins exploration, so Lily and the rest of her team wishes him good luck with that. Mimori knows all the unexplained deaths are because of him, but it works out well in his favor since if people believe there's something strange going on in the ruins, that means fewer mercenaries will show up in the ruins. Mimori heads down deeper until he finally arrives at the room where the dragon chalice is located, and there's a giant gargoyle statue right beside it, but it's totally harmless, so there's no need to worry about it. Yeah, Mimori isn't stupid, so he casts Paralyze and Poison on the statue, and sure enough, it turns out to be a monster, and it soon ends up dying. Mimori has now officially obtained the dragon chalice, and soon after he acquires it, Mist shows up and is disappointed that she didn't manage to get here first. Mimori doesn't really care about the chalice, so he says Mist can have it if she wants. She can't believe Mimori would give her something worth 300 gold coins, so she asks what he wants in return, but Mimori honestly doesn't need anything from her. Mist says she can't accept something so valuable for free, but Mimori says she should just hurry up and take it, and she should probably get some proper sleep soon, otherwise she will end up collapsing. She still doesn't feel right accepting this, so Mimori tells her that he never cared about the cup in the first place. What he is really after is located further down in the ruins, so Mist offers to act as his guard while he's down there. Right now, the only thing she can think to offer him is her skill with her sword, and she promises not to be a hindrance, so Mimori agrees under a few conditions. The first condition is that neither of them ask too many questions about each other's personal lives, and he won't necessarily be returning to the surface within a day, so if Mist wants to return by herself, Mimori won't be responsible for her safety. Mist agrees to the terms, so they head down to the next floor, and Mist shows Mimori just how useful she can be as she cuts down a giant flower monster. Mimori is impressed, but there's something he would like to ask her about. He has noticed that some monsters have golden eyes while others don't, so he was wondering what the difference is between them. Mist explains that monsters with golden eyes are said to contain experience, so they are the perfect prey for monsters, the heroes of another world, to level up. She has no idea that Mimori is one of said heroes, so she goes on to explain that heroes gain no experience from killing humans, so experience for them is something that is unique to monsters. And in regards to monsters without golden eyes, they are just regular monsters and can even form friendly relationships with humans under the right circumstances. According to legends, the Demon King radiates a powerful energy known as Demon Essence, and monsters which are affected by this essence become incredibly violent and have their eyes turn gold. Before they go any further, Mimori suggests they take a break so Mist can get some sleep, but she says she doesn't need any sleep since she is meant to be guarding Mimori, but he eventually convinces her to lie down. And once she does, he casts sleep on her so she can get some proper rest. Meanwhile, the Black Dragon Knights have just come across the site where the Holy Watchers were killed, and their leader, Siva, is excited to face the person who was strong enough to take out the Holy Watchers so easily. After a few hours, Mimori's sleep effect wears off, so Mist's disguise returns as she wakes up and she has no idea how she fell asleep since her pact should still be in effect. She looks around for Mimori, and to her relief, it looks like he was sleeping the entire time, so he couldn't have seen her true identity. However, Mimori is just pretending to sleep so she doesn't become paranoid, and once he pretends to wake up, they continue their journey further into the dungeon. They soon arrive in another room, and while it looks like it's empty, Mimori hears an unsettling sound, so he warns Mist to back away from the door, and moments later, a Skeleton King emerges. Mimori can tell that the Skeleton King is much stronger than any other monster they've faced till now, but Mist believes they should be able to slay it if they target the silver part on its chin. That's a pretty obvious weak spot, but the Skeleton King is still a formidable monster. It is so strong that it would take all the members of the Saber Tiger party to defeat it. The Skeleton King seems to think Mist is the biggest threat here, so she's likely going to get targeted first. She needs to get ready to defend herself, so she tells Mimori that she's about to use her trump card, but she would like it to remain a secret for as long as possible, so she asks him to keep it between them. Mist also apologizes in advance because if the monster exceeds her expectations, then she may not be able to defend Mimori as she had promised earlier. Mimori agrees that the Skeleton King is strong and fighting it would probably be rather troublesome, so he decides to use his ability and paralyze the monster. Mist is shocked when the monster freezes in place, and even more so when Mimori poisons it and defeats the monster in world record time. Now that it has been defeated, Mimori begins collecting the bones from the Skeleton King and confirms that these are the ones the recipe requires. He says they can head back to the surface now, but he can tell that Mist has dozens of questions to ask him, so he says he will give her some answers as long as the questions aren't too invasive. Just then, Pigimura gets Mimori's attention and tells him that there's something interesting over by the skeleton. So Mimori goes to take a look, and he indeed finds something interesting. It's a magic cloth with an egg wrapped inside it. And while he has no idea what to do with it, he decides to take it with him regardless. Meanwhile, Mimori's classmates are all running away in fear after encountering a group of skeleton soldiers, and this girl in particular is freaking out on the floor over her dismembered hand. But there are still skeletons approaching to dismember more than her hand. So Sogu is trying to step up and defend her weaker classmates, but Oyamada doesn't give a shit about his classmates and runs and blasting the skeletons. And so does Takuto, although he nearly kills his classmates as well, but why would he care about them? He just hit level 24, so he is too busy patting himself on the back for a job well done. Meanwhile, Mimori and Mist have made it back to the surface, and Mist presents the dragon chalice so she can receive her reward. And while the crowd surrounds her to get a look at the chalice, Mimori quietly walks away since he has gotten everything he needs from the mill's ruins. After a while, Mist catches up to Mimori and tells him that an award ceremony is going to be held tomorrow where she will be awarded her prize money, so she's still going to need to stay in town till then. Since she's not busy for the rest of the day, Mimori asks if he can have a chat with her in private. He asks if they can meet up in his room later tonight, and Mist is fine with that. So Mimori turns to leave, but before he goes, she grabs Mimori by the arm and thanks him once again for giving her the dragon chalice. Later that night, Pigimura is eating his dinner while Mimori prepares the monster-strengthening solution, and just as he finishes making it, Mist arrives at his door. Mimori lets her inside, and he gets right to the point as he tells Mist that he wants to hire her as his bodyguard. Mist is rather surprised by the proposal, but Mimori thought it would be a win-win since she would get extra travel funds, but then again, if she receives the 300 gold coins, then she probably won't need to worry about money for a while. In any case, he pulls out a map and tells Mist that his goal is to reach the Witch of Taboos in the land of the golden-eyed monsters. He is expecting to get swarmed by a large number of monsters on his journey at least once, so he would feel a lot better if he had a capable warrior there to watch his back for him. And after working with her in the mills, he believes Mist would be the perfect bodyguard for him. Mist happens to be on her way to Yonato, which means she could accompany Mimori quite conveniently, but she is still hesitant to accept the offer for some reason. Mimori notices this and tells her that there's no rush to answer right away. Besides, he had something he wanted to discuss with Ceres first anyway. It takes her a moment to realize that Mimori just called her by her real name, and once she does, she asks Mimori how he knew about her real identity. Mimori reveals that he was the one who put her to sleep back in the dungeon, and as such, he saw her real face. It's clear that she was hesitating to accept his offer because she was worried about how difficult it would be to keep her identity secret from him while traveling together, which is probably the reason she refused to sleep while working with Mimori earlier. He assures her that he has no intention of selling her out for any reason, so she doesn't have to worry about him betraying her. Ceres reveals that she uses the power of spirits to conceal her identity, but in exchange, she has to forego her desire to sleep. That's why she returns to normal when she goes to sleep, and it's also the reason why the Holy Watchers were chasing her back in the forest, since they managed to spot her while she was asleep and didn't have her disguise. She begins to undo her disguise as she tells Mimori that she is grateful for him killing the Holy Watchers, since she has a lot less to worry about now. Mimori asks if the fact that she removed her disguise around him means that she trusts him now, and Ceres confirms that she believes he is a trustworthy person. She officially agrees to act as Mimori's bodyguard, and the two shake hands to mark their new partnership. Mimori reaches into his bag and pulls out a blue gem to give to Ceres as her payment, but Ceres is stunned as he hands it to her because this thing is an authentic blue dragon gem. Mimori doesn't know what the big deal is since it's just one of the gems he looted in the abandoned ruins, so Ceres explains that gems like this are incredibly rare and are even worth way more than the dragon chalice. Mimori doesn't really care that the gem is valuable, so he tells Ceres she can still keep the gem anyway. Ceres doesn't want to accept it because it is worth way too much, but Mimori has a whole bag full of them, so he insists that she keep the gem. Ceres finally relents and agrees to accept the gem as payment, but before they go their separate ways for today, Mimori says they should still call each other by their aliases to protect their identities when they are out in public. Ceres agrees to this, and since they will be working together for a while, she thinks she should inform Mimori of the reason why she is on the run. However, Mimori tells her he doesn't need to know as he has no interest in prying into her past unnecessarily, nor does he want her to feel pressure into telling him anything. The next day, Mimori and Ceres are having breakfast together, and Mimori takes the opportunity to ask her if she happens to know anything about forbidden magic. Ceres tells him that it is magic that has been prohibited by Vicious, but they are generally understood to be specific ancient spells. The only reason the spells are forbidden is because Vicious said so and the people don't like questioning her. If Vicious went through the trouble to personally outlaw the forbidden spells, then it is very likely that she did so because the spells could be dangerous to her. Unfortunately, Ceres doesn't have any more information on the forbidden spells, but Mimori says she has given him a good amount of info, so he's thankful. After breakfast, Ceres says she needs to go to the award ceremony so she can get her prize, so she will meet back up with Mimori in the afternoon, and after going their separate ways, Mimori decides to head into the forest and test out that monster-strengthening potion he made. Meanwhile, at the reception for Ceres, an illusionist was hired to make sure the dragon chalice was the real thing, and this wouldn't be an issue normally, but Ceres has a bad feeling about this since she's using illusion magic to hide her identity. Hours go by and Ceres still hasn't returned like she had said she would, so Mimori is starting to get rather worried. Meanwhile, Vicious is having a meeting with Sogu over the recent ruin expedition to the ruins that the class took, and Sogu asks if Vicious can take care of Sakura, since she got her hand cut off. Vicious agrees to heal the girl, but she makes it clear that she's only doing it because Sakura is B rank. Otherwise, if she were something like D rank, then health insurance wouldn't be available for her. By the way, Vicious asks Sogu if she has considered joining Takuju's team, but Sogu can't imagine herself getting along with Takuju when he cares so little about the lives around him. Vicious calls Sogu's decision selfish, so Sogu starts trying to explain herself, but Vicious tells her she isn't obligated to justify herself, although she wants to know if Sogu is still committed to saving this world since she isn't putting in as much effort as an S-rank adventurer should. Sogu asserts that she is fulfilling her duties as an S-rank in her own way, so Vicious agrees to let her do as she pleases, but she also says that Sogu will be tasked with taking care of those who couldn't pass the trials. Vicious wants her to train them, but Sogu is against the idea since the original deal was that she would fight on behalf of the weak ones. Vicious claims that a royal decree ordered her to dispose of all heroes who aren't capable of fighting. So Vicious wants Sogu to train them so they can learn to kill monsters, and of course, if Sogu refuses, Vicious will immediately dispose of her weak classmates, so Sogu doesn't really have much of a choice here. She is forced to agree to Vicious's terms, and as she is leaving, Vicious points out that if any of her classmates become a hindrance to her, she may have to deal with them herself, but of course it's not like she wants to get rid of them or anything. Back to Mimori, more time has passed and Ceres still isn't back yet, so either she ditched him or something happened to her. And considering how honest she has been thus far, the only possibility is that she got abducted. She has no reason to even want to lie to Mimori in the first place because we gain nothing from doing so. As Mimori is on his way to go looking for Ceres, he hears two guys talking about how Ceres' identity was revealed during the banquet, and she was forced to flee into the forest to escape, but Mills is organizing a hunting party to go after her. And this hunting party consists of the Black Dragon Knights. As the knights chase after Ceres, she attempts to transform using her spirit regalia, but her spirit of light got disoriented when her disguise was destroyed, so she won't be able to transform for now and has to fight in base form. She manages to take out a couple of the lower-ranked knights, but it was really difficult for her, so she fears what might happen if one of the higher-ranking members were to attack her now. Just then, she notices an arrow being fired at her from behind, but she can tell that it is just a distraction, so she quickly rushes to face her real opponent, the Dragon Knight's vice-captain. He is a much tougher foe than the rest of them, so she struggles to defend herself and she unfortunately loses her footing, so the vice-captain disarms her as she falls to the ground and gets on top of her. He is about to do unspeakable things, but before he actually does anything, Mimori arrives and paralyzes him. Ceres is shocked to see Mimori here, but she knows she is safe now, so she climbs out from under the vice-captain and Mimori gives him a non-lethal dose of poison for good measure. Ceres asks Mimori why he came looking for her, but before their conversation goes any further, Mimori puts the vice-captain to sleep so he can't overhear them. Ceres warns Mimori that if he stays with her, then he will be pursued by the Black Dragon Knights as well, so she's willing to return the gem he gave her and nullify their contract so that she doesn't cause him any trouble. Mimori tells her that won't be necessary because for one, he has a lot of those gems, so the money isn't an issue for him, but more importantly, he isn't going to find another bodyguard whom he can trust like Ceres, so he's going to stick with her. And right now, he needs Ceres to take off her clothes. This was the end of episode 5. Subscribe to not miss the next part.